Let's talk about what I'm looking for here and talk about the Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle that Moses built in the wilderness.
The Ark of the Covenant, containing the stone tablets with the Ten Commandments which God gave to Moses, embodying the presence of the Lord amongst the people of Israel. Symbol of the bond between God and his chosen people. Core of early Judaic religion for which King Solomon built the temple in Jerusalem, the Ark of the Covenant, lost forever. For over 20 years now, Wendell Jones, preacher and self-styled archaeologist, has led volunteers on a ceaseless quest to find the Ark. Over 2,500 years ago, ever since the prophet Jeremiah described doom over Israel and the coming of the armies of Assyria and Babylon, the Ark has vanished without trace, the greatest mystery of the Bible which has haunted Jones throughout his life.
Jeremiah the prophet and these people hid the Ark of the Covenant here with the tabernacle within a few hundred yards of where we're sitting. It's been there since that time, and the copper scroll tells exactly where it's hidden.
Ancient tradition says priests and prophets hid the Ark and other sacred relics before Israel's darkest hour struck. But where? Some say inside the Temple Mount itself. Others believe Mount Nebo on the other side of the River Jordan. Wendell Jones believes it's here, somewhere in these cliffs, which separate the Judean desert from the Dead Sea. Half a century ago, a young Arab in search of a stray goat threw a rock into one of the many cavities here. That's how, the story goes, the first of the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, now enshrined in this Museum of the Book in Jerusalem. The scrolls were hidden on the eve of the Jewish Rising and the Holocaust, which Roman armies wrought around 70 AD, destroying the temple in Jerusalem. But Wendell Jones believes this mysterious scroll, made out of copper, refers to times more ancient. A time 7 centuries earlier, when Israel desperately sought to fight off the armies of Assyria, which ended in destruction of Solomon's first temple, long exile in Babylon. A time when Israel mourned the loss of its most sacred possessions. Tales the Bible tells, which have been part of Wendell's life.
My mother of blessed memory read the Bible to us all of our lives till we got old enough to read it. I asked her one time, I said, "Mother, when did you start reading the Bible to us?" She said, "Well, since you asked." I woke up one morning very sick. My mother was a very healthy woman, but she's so sick. She went across the street to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Vera, you're in your 2nd month of pregnancy." She said, "I came home, sat down at the table, opened the Bible to the book of Genesis, rolled up a newspaper like a megaphone, and I began to read the book of Genesis into my stomach because I believe the fetus could learn." Of course, that 68 years ago, no one then thought that was logical. Today we know the fetus can learn.
Throughout his life, Jones was puzzled by the disappearance of the Ark. No word of where it went, neither in Bible nor in Torah or in any other text.
My question was, where are these records? "Mother, where are these records?" She didn't know where the records were. She said, "I don't know." But she said, "You can rest assured if the Jewish people made a record of it, they still have it."
Jones thinks the ancient copper scroll is that record which lists the treasures of Solomon's lost temple. He believes he has decoded its secret message and that it points him to where the Ark is hidden as sure as if it were a treasure map.
This is a facsimile of the copper scroll based on the Melech. Here it says, "There is a tomb on the river of the Dome." Now, if we notice this wadi goes up, and at the top of the wadi you notice that there's a dome. So the word kippah is a dome. Nahal HaKippah, the river of the dome. So we have the river of the dome, we have the cave of the column with 2 entries with the hole in the top. The geographical description of where we're standing right here exactly fits what is described in the scroll. This scroll was written as a treasure scroll, and there is a codification, I'm not going to give it now, to where you can know exactly where to go from one scroll to the other. That's a secret, and I don't care to divulge that until we finish using the scroll, and then we'll publish a book on it.
And so Jones has led dozens of enthusiasts year after year in a quest after the Ark, burrowing these Dead Sea caves, a quest viewed with skepsis by Israeli scholars and authorities. Teddy Kollek, former mayor of Jerusalem.
The greatest find would be the temple treasures, but I don't think there is any chance ever finding them anywhere.
Skepsis which left Jones undeterred, because gradually his quest met with success. In the early 90s, this jar was found which Jones believes contained the biblical anointing oil, and later on a hoard of precious incense, part of the hidden treasures of the temple.
Jones has been scouring the ancient caves of Qumran for the past quarter century, searching for the sacred artifacts of the Second Temple, and, he says, for the most prized archaeological treasure of all time, the Ark of the Covenant, which contains the Ten Commandments. The archaeological adventures of Vendell Jones are believed to be the inspiration behind the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark.
The movie is a drag as compared to what we're doing here.
This Texas scholar feels his team is closer than ever to a major archaeological find.
But the general elation wasn't shared by authorities in Israel.
Expected them to come down and say congratulations. Instead, they came down and took away my permit.
We're not violating any law. This is a nature reserve. Please take your car outside.
I've checked with your department. I know where your boundaries are. You're out of jurisdiction where you are right now.
The question who's in charge in this area, part of occupied territory, has added to the confusion. But in spite of vehement protests, lawsuits and court orders, Israeli authorities have denied Vendell Jones permission to continue digging. For years already, his visits to the site had to be limited to brief excursions, when he and his friends can only reminisce about what they feel to be so close to.
Been a lot of years from inside. Hello, friend. In the book of Psalms, it says, Amet ma'aretz titzmach, the truth shall spring out of the earth. It doesn't spring out so easily, but it does come out. Yeah. A lot of sweat, blood, and tears in these caves.
Jones refers to times when he and his people saw danger in the face.
They had a big earthquake here in 747, and many of these caves caved in, the roofs fell in on the floor.
Several times, their improvised shafts and ramshackle pit props groaned as the earth grumbled. Situations from which Vendell Jones loomed larger than life.
Has anybody seen that water bucket? Where's the water bucket? You, Larry, bring the water bucket down.
These are moments which have welded an unbreakable bond between Jones and his fellow questers.
How you like my face?
Oh my God!
Have we got a clean spot on it now? It's like a family. You don't live over here for 3 months in the trench and in the tent with people without having a special attachment.
For several years now, Jones and his people have been biding their time, fretting for the longed-for permission to dig for the place where they are sure the Ark has rested for over 25 centuries. But they may be wrong altogether.
Yes, the Ark is here in Aksum. Since the time it has departed from Jerusalem and has rested in Aksum, it is still in Aksum.
You yourself believe it is there?
I wholeheartedly wholeheartedly believe, not only I, but all believers of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church.
Almost all of Ethiopia's 20,000 churches have a tabernacle and a hidden object, symbol for the Ark of the Covenant, and carry images how it got there, as a gift which Ethiopia's Queen of Sheba received from King Solomon of Israel. Ethiopian Christians firmly believe the Ark is here in Ethiopia.
The fame of King Solomon reached the ear of the famous Ethiopian Queen of Sheba. What touched her heart was that he was a wise man and his wisdom was from above.
Legend in Ethiopia has it that the Queen of Sheba traveled to King Solomon, that they fell in love and had a son. His name was Menelik, first emperor of Ethiopia. And King Solomon so loved this son that he let him have Israel's most sacred possession, the Ark of the Covenant. And that is how this holiest of relics, symbol of the bond between God and his chosen people, passed with Menelik from Israel to Ethiopia.
Can you imagine the wisest man on earth building a glorious temple in Jerusalem strictly to house the Ark of the Covenant and then giving it to his son by the Queen of Sheba to take to Africa and keep for safekeeping in a grass hut? Doesn't make sense.
Outside Ethiopia, this legend has always been subject of ridicule. The Bible leaves no doubt that the Ark remained in the temple in Jerusalem for centuries after King Solomon. Menelik, if he ever existed, simply couldn't have carried the Ark to Ethiopia. Yet, the belief that the Ark is in Ethiopia forms the very core of religion in that country. Still, most scholars don't place the land of Sheba in Ethiopia at all. To them, the Queen of Sheba came from southern Arabia. The legend of Menelik and the Ark can't be more than a charming bit of folklore. And yet, whatever happened to the Ark, holding the 10 Commandments which God gave to Moses, over which hovered the presence of the Lord as it led the Jews to their promised land, the embodiment of God which brought down the enemies of Israel?
The greatest mystery of the Bible, perhaps the greatest mystery of all human history, this priceless object in which the presence of God was believed to reside, emanating supernatural powers, the focus of worship in the early Judaic religion from which all the other great religions of the world spring, that it should go missing. This was what fascinated me, that it should vanish without a trace, without mention in the scriptures, without lament, that it should just go. It seemed to me impossible that this should be the case. There had to be a story behind it. There had to be a truth there to uncover, and that's why I was attracted to it.
As a long-time correspondent in Africa, author Graham Hancock had been fascinated by the Ethiopian legend for many years. Like everybody else, he had found no truth in it. But on a few days off in France, an event occurred which led to a string of new discoveries. It all began with a little cafe on Chartres Cathedral Square.
Pourquoi cet restaurant s'appelle la Reine de Saba?
C'est de rapport à la cathédrale avec le portail du Nord. Vous avez la statuette de la Reine de Saba.
Queen of Sheba has always been thought of as an Arabian figure. Even today, scholars associate her with Sabia, with South Arabia. But here in Chartres Cathedral, amazingly, is corroboration of the Ethiopian claim to the Queen of Sheba. A statue of the Queen of Sheba set unmistakably in an African context with an Ethiopian figure at her feet. And when I saw that, it brought back to me the conviction that there was a real mystery, an ancient mystery in that country associated with the Queen of Sheba. And more exciting still, here I find, very close to the statue of the Queen of Sheba, an image of the Ark of the Covenant and a strange inscription, Hika Mikitur, here is hidden. It's obscure and ambiguous, but it contains the possibility of the Ark being concealed in the land of the Queen of Sheba and of that land being Ethiopia.
It all brought to mind strange ceremonies and years of research into the Ethiopian legend. Hancock had allowed himself to be dissuaded by the conventional wisdom of scholars, but now his chance discovery in Chartres brought back the desire to renew his quest for the lost Ark of the Covenant.
So why should we find this echo of the Ethiopian tradition in a Christian church in northern Europe dating from the 12th century? It seemed to me extremely puzzling, unless in some way those who built the north porch of Chartres Cathedral had had contact with Ethiopia and perhaps had learned something about the Ethiopian tradition that impressed them enough to go to the trouble to build these sculptures.
Chartres Cathedral was born in that surge of zeal which brought the Crusades, the conquest of the Holy Land, and also a discovery of the Arab world in the achievements of the ancients. Out of Chartres sprang a new school of thought and building, Gothic architecture. At its birth stood a proud and mysterious order, the Knights Templar, vanguard of a century of surprising creativity.
C'est un siècle riche, un siècle inventif, un siècle qui ose. Qu'on n'oublie pas que c'est le siècle où l'on développe par exemple la cartographie. On sait aller jusqu'à Jérusalem avec des cartes terrestres. Un des enseignants, Bernard de Chartres, écrit « Si nous avons quelques connaissances aujourd'hui, il ne faut pas oublier que nous sommes comme des nains montés sur les épaules des géants. »
The secret longing of that age is voiced in a book describing a quest to the unknown outer marches of the world, Wolfram von Eschenbach's Parsifal and the Quest for the Holy Grail. It reaches out to some central mystery in religion, and it bears the stamp of the Knights Templar.
C'est pratiquement sous les yeux de ces Templiers, de ces secrétaires, que la quête pour le Graal, Perceval le Gallois, a été conçue et rédigée.
Scholars haven't ceased studying the meaning of the Parsifal of von Eschenbach, overlooking strange echoes of Africa which shake Hancock, an expert of the continent.
Here we have a searcher for the Grail riding deep into Africa, past the Rojas. Now, many scholars have thought that Roja in this context referred to somewhere in Europe, but I know for a fact that Roja is the ancient name, a long forgotten name for an ancient capital of Ethiopia, now known as Lalibela. This exciting discovery in Wolfram von Eschenbach turned my mind back to a mystery that had puzzled me years before, the incredible phenomenon of the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, churches carved out of solid rock on a gigantic scale, conceived in the mind of a master architect. And there were legends that these churches had been built by white men. Could those white men have been Templars? Look, here on this roof, the double cross of the Knights Templar. This discovery came as a revelation for me. It drew me to Jerusalem, where in the 12th century, the Templars began their quest for the central mystery of the High Middle Ages. For some, it was the Holy Grail. Others speak of hidden treasure. For me, it's one object, the Ark of the Covenant. It was here in Jerusalem in the 12th century that the Knights Templar had their headquarters. They based themselves right behind me in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which they made their palace. And they built this porch, they added it on to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And we can see in this porch the first flowering of the style of Gothic architecture that achieved its full fruition in Chartres Cathedral. A new departure in building and a new departure in human thought, engineered, originating with the Knights Templar. Everything about them is mysterious. They seem to come from nowhere. In the early 1100s, a group of 9 rather obscure knights goes to Jerusalem. manages to get itself established upon the Temple Mount, takes full control of the Temple Mount, doesn't allow anybody else in there. They were searching for the Ark. There could be no more precious religious relic than the Ark of the Covenant. If they could acquire the Ark and bring it back to Europe, then their ambitions to achieve power, secular power, would be fulfilled. With this object in their hands, they would be absolutely unstoppable.
Initially, the Templars seemed guided by what they gathered from the Jews.
One of the strongest Jewish traditions has it that the Ark of the Covenant is buried somewhere here in the caverns and tunnels that lie beneath the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount itself, for centuries, has been a political minefield, impossible for archaeologists to work beneath. But in one period, the Crusader period, when the Templars, the Knights Templar, were in occupation of the Temple Mount, they used that opportunity to dig beneath the Temple Mount in search of the Ark of the Covenant, I believe. Suddenly, they stopped. It's as though they learnt some new information.
The Church of Ethiopia has always maintained a monastery in Jerusalem. Today, only a sad remnant testifies of the way Ethiopia nourished its ties with this Christian center of the Holy Sepulchre. For many centuries on end, a tiny trickle of monks slipped through Muslim lands virtually unnoticed to break Ethiopia's isolation. But stronger churches gradually pushed them out of their chapels and once extensive possessions. Now the monks huddle under the caved-in roof of a Crusader church, facing an ever-present parade of pilgrims. The Via Dolorosa leads even right through their one remaining chapel. Services are held under the constant push of tourists passing by and the relentless scrutiny of tourist cameras. All the monks can do is sadly reminisce a greater past.
የታችኛው ተዘግቶ ነበረ። ሰው ሲያጣ አርመን ገብቶ እንግዲህ በሃይማኖትም የኔ ተከታዮች ናቸው መንግስትም እንድጠብቅ አደራ ሰጥቶኛል ብሎ በዚህ ስበብ ገብቶ ያዘው በዚያው እንደያዘው ቀረ ነው እንግዲህ የሚባለው።
Taking over, the foreign priests burnt all Ethiopian books and records stored here, so that only memory remains to testify of an event 8 centuries ago. At the time of the Templars, a young prince then sought refuge here from Ethiopia. His name was Lalibela. Lalibela fled from rivals to the throne of Ethiopia. For the Templars, the young prince must have had exciting information. Lalibela fled to Jerusalem with only few. 20 years later, he went back with many to reclaim his throne.
What I've managed to reconstruct is that a meeting did take place between the Templars and this future king, Lalibela. And at that meeting, Lalibela informed the Templars that the Ark of the Covenant was in his country, in Ethiopia. And I believe a deal was done. They wanted the Ark. He wanted to become king of Ethiopia. They were a powerful military order. He said to them, put me back on my throne and I will give you access to this object. And I think that's what happened.
Scholars mostly ignore this fact, nor did they give attention to another fact. At the time of Lalibela's return to Ethiopia, Crusader knights fit out a small fleet at Aqaba. It sails the Red Sea and is destroyed, attacking Muslim ships of Mecca. But could it have gone a little further, carrying Lalibela back to the throne of Ethiopia?
The Templar evidence for me, it played a crucial role in my own quest. It made me confident that there was much, much more to the Ethiopian claim to possess the Ark than the scholars were ever prepared to admit. But I was confronted by a real problem. The story of Menelik bringing the Ark of the Covenant to Ethiopia could not be true. Therefore, if the Ark had got to Ethiopia, what I needed to find out was the real historical process that had brought it there. There had to be an explanation, and that's what I set myself to find.
The Bible doesn't write about the stunning disappearance of its most sacred relic. It shrouds the fact in mystery. Jewish tradition has it that the ark was secretly hidden to preserve it from the armies of Assyria and Babylon, but one scholar blames the king of Israel himself.
It disappeared at the time of Manasseh, which is an exceptional chapter in the history of the First Temple period. Manasseh was a pagan ruler. He simply introduced an image of Asherah, which is a Canaanite image, idol, into the temple. Both of them, the Asherah and the ark, couldn't stand together. It was a problem of either or. The priests of Jerusalem would not allow such a thing, nor the prophets, for instance, nor the people at large. It is remarked in the text of Manasseh that he shed very much blood, to such an extent that he filled up Jerusalem with innocent blood. Innocent blood is an epithet for the blood of the prophets. Apparently the popular prophets who tried to defend the ancient religion of the Judeans. Now, even this is hinted at in 3 or 4 words at most. And as I said, the occasion was so repelling for the writers that they couldn't dwell upon it. You feel it. They save words. They speak of it only briefly. When you come to ask them, those writers of the Bible, why Jerusalem was destroyed, the answer is precisely because of the sins of Manasseh.
In the years following Manasseh, the prophet Jeremiah laments the loss of the ark and the coming doom of Israel. Soon after come the armies of Assyria and Babylon. In the tunnels and caverns of the Temple Mount, Jews lament the fall of Jerusalem, the destruction of the first and second temple. But hardly anyone knows of the existence of another temple in ancient times. A third temple built by refugees from Manasseh's persecutions, who took their cue from a verse in the scriptures.
There will be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar near its border. And taking its cue from this verse, in the time when the king Manasseh paganized the temple in Jerusalem, a group of disaffected priests fled to Egypt and set up a replacement temple at Elephantine.
The island of Elephantine. For over a century, it had housed a colony of Jewish soldiers, mercenaries paid by the pharaohs to guard Egypt's southern border. The site has been excavated by German archaeologists.
Die erste Sensation bestand darin, dass Jahrhundertwende Papyri auf Elephantine gefunden wurden, die von einer jüdischen Gemeinschaft im Süden Ägyptens auf Elephantine berichten. Die zweite Sensation bestand darin, dass in den Texten ein jüdischer Tempel im Stadtgebiet erwähnt wird, ganz ähnlich wie der Tempel in Jerusalem. Dieser Tempel durfte eigentlich nicht sein.
The best bet for the site of the Jewish temple is just over there, underneath that rubble of thousands of years. What we're seeing there are the remains of the Temple of Khnum that was extended on top of the Jewish temple, but that's where the Jewish temple lay. And over here, very close to it, we see the habitations of the Jewish military colony, which extended down here and along the edge of this hillside here. It's a theological puzzle that this temple was ever built. In that period, which was a period of extremely hardline religion, there were no other Jewish temples anywhere in the world. The whole concept of Judaism was focused upon the temple and upon the ark. Therefore, for another temple to be built only becomes comprehensible if that temple was built to house the ark, and that's exactly what I believe happened.
How long did the ark remain here, in your opinion?
In my opinion, the ark remained here from 650 BC, the time of Manasseh, until 410 BC, when this Jewish temple on Elephantine was completely destroyed.
Egypt has come under foreign sway. The Jewish priests and mercenaries are now in the pay of the King of Kings of Persia and hated for it by the Egyptians. On Elephantine itself reigns Khnum, a ram-headed god. Only a stone's throw from where the Egyptians worship this mummy of a ram as their god Khnum, the Jews worship their god Yahweh with blood offerings of bulls and rams, angering the priests of Khnum. When Egypt rises against Persian rule, they seize their opportunity. The Jewish temple is destroyed and the Jews of Elephantine are forced to flee. Their only way is to the south, not through the north back into Israel, for there a hostile Egypt blocks the way. But moreover, a welcome back in Israel is no longer certain, for Israel itself has changed dramatically.
I believe that the Jewish faith, based in Jerusalem, had evolved during the centuries of the absence of the Ark from Jerusalem. We have to remember the Ark is taken out of Jerusalem during the First Temple period and brought to Elephantine in 650 BC, certainly according to the way that I reconstructed. What happened after that, another 70 years later, was that the First Temple in Jerusalem was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, and the Jews were carted off into exile in Babylon. There they began to worship an incorporeal deity, a deity who had no physical presence in any one place, but who was everywhere, intangible and omnipotent. During this period of exile in Babylon, the Jewish religion evolved into the kind of religion that it has become today. And I believe that it was only here on Elephantine, where the Ark remains secure, that the old form of the Jewish religion was maintained. So, for the Ark to come back to Jerusalem at this time, in 410 BC, would have created further conflicts with between the established priesthood in Jerusalem and the established priesthood here. So, all the motivations point to a journey to the south. Not north through a hostile Egypt to a Jerusalem that no longer wanted the Ark, but south towards Ethiopia, following the Nile River system, away from these burning deserts, and into the green highlands of Ethiopia around Lake Tana.
Holy Lake Tana in the central Ethiopian highlands. Around 400 before Christ, Jewish refugees from Egypt arrived here, deep into the heart of Africa. Perhaps to join other Jews who might have come centuries earlier in the company of Menelik, the legendary son of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. In Lake Tana lies a small island, Tana Kirkos.
This is a Christian country and a Christian island, but they have a powerful ancient memory of a time when they were Jews and when they conducted blood sacrifice. On Tana Kirkos, they told me that the Ark of the Covenant had rested for 800 years. That when it was first brought to Ethiopia, it had been brought to that specific island and placed there for safekeeping. That it had been the focus of worship for a people who at that time were entirely Jewish, and that for 800 years it had remained the focus of their worship. And they showed me altars that had stood before the Ark of the Covenant, in front of it, where the blood of the sacrifice had been poured. Suddenly, all the gaps were bridged.
በዚህ ላይ ደሙ ይኳታል ስጋው በዚህ ይወራረዳል ከዚህ ላይ ህዝቡ በዚህ ይሰበሰባሉ እየተረጨ ቁርባኑ ያነበረ
The ark stood before these sacrificial stones and the sacrifice was carried out in a certain way, and the way that they demonstrate the scattering of the blood is exactly in accord with Old Testament Jewish traditions. It's described in fact in the Mishnah, and it's quite inconceivable that this Christian monk here on this island has ever read the Mishnah. So he's passing down to us a very pure ancient tradition of Jewish blood sacrifice before the Ark of the Covenant, in the presence of the Ark of the Covenant on this island. And although the Ark of the Covenant was taken away perhaps 1600 years ago to Axum, where it rests today, its presence is still felt here. For me, I feel a very strange sensation of the Ark of the Covenant having stamped its power and its energy on this island and on these ancient rocks.
At the dawn of Christianity, the Jews of Ethiopia wane in power and in number. Early in the 90s, the remnant of these falashas is airlifted to Israel, where they rapidly adapt and lose track of their past. But some of their elders still remember how they once came to Ethiopia over 2 millennia ago. Ques Raphael Hadan can still describe the route, full of danger and hardships, which according to ancient Falasha oral tradition the fleeing Jews from Elephantine followed to the mountains of Ethiopia. Centuries later, Christianity ends the worship of the Ark by Jews at Tanakirkos. Ethiopia's new Christian kings wrestle it from the Jews and take it elsewhere. Ethiopia belongs to Christianity. And nowhere is the victory of Christianity as clear as it is here. A town of holy churches built differently from all others in Ethiopia. Inside, they sometimes remind one of medieval Europe. Outside, they bear no comparison to anything at all. Its ancient name was Roha, until an exiled prince, returning to claim the throne of Ethiopia, named it after himself Lalibela. Churches wrested out of stony slopes and hewn in one piece out of solid rock. In a forecourt, a priest recites a prayer for the dried-out corpses of those who dared eat the bread of Holy Communion. Lalibela flourished at the times of the Crusaders and of the Templars. Later Portuguese travelers speak of legends about white people helping build these churches.
This church is dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and that is not an accident, because the Virgin Mary was a figure of great significance to the Templars, and this church was built by the Knights Templar, and it is full of mementos and memories of the Templars. Look here, we find the Croix Patée, the cross of the Templars, and here up above, set in a Star of David, also a Seal of Solomon, a perfect Templar cross, painted red as the crosses of the Templars were painted 800 years ago. The whole place is full of these memories, and if we come around here, we find something quite remarkable. If I'm not mistaken, what we see up here is an image of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. And strangely, spectacularly, it bears on its domes crosses. There was only one period in history when the Al-Aqsa Mosque was decorated with crosses, and that was the period of the Templar occupation in the 12th century.
If this evidence may be refuted, the next may not. Legend has it that Jesus Christ himself appeared to instruct King Lalibela how to build this church. He leaned against this pillar, and therefore it's wrapped in shrouds, shielding it from curious eyes forever.
Is it possible for me to see it? Could you at least tell me what is written there behind the cloth?
አላዶር ዳናት አዴራ ሮዳስ አምስቱ ቅንዋተ መስቀል
Sator Rotas. These words Sator and Rotas were of special significance to the Templars. They form an anagram, in fact. They read the same in reverse. And we find these words on a Templar property at Gisors in France.
The exact words of the Templar cryptogram are Sator, Sador, Arapo, Alido, Tenet, Danat, Opera, Abera, Rotas and Rodas. All words can be reversed, both fore and backwards, both horizontally and vertically. The word of tenet forms a cross and means in Latin it is held, and rearranged the letters twice form the Latin word of Pater Noster, our Father, with an A and an O left over, Alpha and Omega, the names of God indeed. Medieval crusaders penetrating deep into Africa, a fact which so far was totally ignored. These are the dungeons of a castle overlooking Aksum, the town of the Holy Ark of the Covenant.
It's another Templar cross down here in the darkness, a perfect croix-pattée. My feeling is the Templars took over this old castle and used it as their headquarters here in Aksum, and left us these memories of themselves. It could be on the end of a tomb. It could be a tomb. It could be. There's an intriguing eyewitness report from an Armenian geographer named Abu Saleh, a report dated to 1207. Abu Saleh visited Aksum. He gives us, in fact, the only eyewitness report of the Ark of the Covenant in Ethiopia, and what he tells us is amazing.
Hate them. I hate bats. Look at those evil little buggers.
They just pissed on my face. Holy shit. He tells us that the Ark of the Covenant was carried in procession by men who were white in complexion with red and blonde hair. No Ethiopians look like that. Those men who carried the Ark in procession in Aksum were the Templars.
"800 years ago they came for this, the great ceremony of Timkat, that one day in January, when crowds in holy Aksum await the coming of the Ark."
Attending Timkat in Aksum is like making a journey through time. The dance of David before the Ark of the Covenant, that is described in detail in the Old Testament, is replicated in full life. The antiphonal chanting, passing voices back and forwards, all of this plunges us back into the Old Testament world.
Ancient symbols of an empire which once ruled all of Ethiopia and beyond, and brought the Ark here from Tanakirkos at the dawn of Christianity. For ages they've looked down upon the coming of the Ark. No one has ever seen or touched the Ark in Aksum. Not even the patriarchs, the highest in authority, have ever had the right to penetrate the holiest of holies and see what's truly there. As with the ancient Jews, that right belongs to one man only, the guardian of the Ark.
There is a priest designated to eat from generation to generation. Because I am a patriarch, or my predecessors, because they were patriarchs, they don't have the right to demand or to overcome the command of God.
How is he designated?
Because of his dedication, submission to God, simplicity. Whoever God chooses him to be, the guardian of the Ark is.
This little chapel in Aksum houses the Ark and Tesfa Mariam, its guardian, the only man who is allowed to see and touch it and is condemned to always stay next to it. Never may he distance himself from it. Walking in the footsteps of Moses and Aaron, Tesfa Mariam still stands in awe of the Ark he has to guard.
ምክንያቱ ጽላት ሕጊ ዘበሎ ብምንታይ እዩ ገባሬ ተአምር ስለዝኾነ ኣብ ኢትዮጵያ እንተይ መጻት ሒዞም ንየ እንተለፍቱ ዝነበሩ ምስ ሙሴ ንሱ ዘይፈትዎ ሕጊ ሕይ ድማ ኣብ መዓልቲ ህዝቢ ብዙሓት እናጨረሰ ነይሩ።
On the festival of Timkat, from every one of Ethiopia's 20,000 churches, replicas symbolizing the Ark are brought out in procession. But here in Aksum, this casket, wrapped in a costly veil, is believed by many to be the true Ark. Yet, Tesfa Mariam is not amongst the priests participating. The guardian of the Ark remains within the holiest of holies, as if the real Ark has not come out at all. Lit candles on a piece of wood are pushed before the Ark into the water. If it floats, the year will bring prosperity, relief from famine and hardship. Thousands ring the basin known as the bath of the Queen of Sheba. As a priest blesses the water, there's one magic moment when silence falls and flocks of doves appear from nowhere to circle above the waters. The candles still floating, the blessing is received. For a few precious minutes, the water is considered holy, and the crowd surge forward to draw some of it, whilst boys defy the orders of the priests prohibiting anyone from swimming. During the night, the casket rests in a tent, and as in the days of Moses, the people guard the tabernacle and fill the night with prayers.
The Ethiopian Orthodox Church is literally unique in the world. There's nothing else quite like it. And it's a very pure and simple form of religion in its own way. I hesitate to say this, but almost paganistic in its reversion to the worship of the Ark of the Covenant. Paganistic, but filled with a powerful belief in God and the presence of God hovering over Ethiopia itself, brought there by the Ark of the Covenant. It's the unshakable belief of the Ethiopians that the Ark of the Covenant, the embodiment of God, is here in Aksum. There was a time when I dismissed this idea as preposterous along with everyone else in the West. But a small incident during a vacation in Chartres led me to a string of discoveries which now convince me that the Ethiopian claim is true and that the Ark indeed survived here through many centuries of turmoil. One thing's certain, however, it's not this casket wrapped in veils now being carried back into the sanctuary. That's just a replica. It must be. For Tesfa Mariam, the guardian of the Ark, never participated in the procession. All that time he stayed here at the chapel, guarding what really remained behind, the holiest relic of antiquity, which it is his sacred duty to protect and from which he may never be separated. I'll never know for sure if it is the real Ark. No one ever will. Only he knows, the guardian of the Ark, keeper of a mystery which must remain concealed. For myself, I no longer have any need to penetrate the veils of that mystery. I know the Ark is there.
Ethiopia, Jerusalem's Temple Mount, or Dead Sea Caves? Does the Ark lie waiting somewhere for who takes up the quest as his true destiny?
I believe in destiny. Yeah.